I'd only been awake for 14 minutes, and already it had been a hell of a morning. I'd had another damn nightmare about being buried alive, and came out of it screaming, anxious, and feeling sicker by the minute. My girlfriend Joan woke up with me, only her affliction was way worse than mine. An early period and cramps so bad she could barely walk. And for me, well, things were just heating up. I'd had to wait several minutes for Joni to get herself sorted out in the bathroom, and as I lay in bed, I began thinking about monsters. I didn't know why at the time, but I kept imagining shadowy beasts with large jaws and giant teeth hiding underneath the bed, in the closet, and in the dark corners of the room. It felt as if they were stalking me, keeping their distance, but preparing to leap and attack at just the right moment. It was a ridiculous notion, then. Finally, Joni came stumbling out of the bathroom, jaw clenched, holding her stomach. "You all right?" I asked. "Not really," she moaned, lurching toward our bedroom door. "But I'm going to take a buttload of Motrin and crawl back in bed." "Okay," I said, sliding out from the warmth of the blankets. If I'd had any sense, I would have hid under the covers and never came out. Maybe then the monsters never would have found me. But, like an idiot, I walked my sick, shivering ass into the bathroom and began to be assaulted by everything. Joan normally cranked the heater up at this time of year, but the place was freezing, and as soon as my bare feet touched the tile, I screamed and jumped. The floor wasn't just cold, wasn't just freezing, it was like walking on sheets of ice in Antarctica. "Fuck!" I yelled, walking tiptoe toward the tub. Joan had left the light on, and it hurt my eyes almost as bad as the floor hurt my feet. The fan ground into my eardrums like a dentist drill with a little bass. So, squinting, hands over my ears, I passed the sink, the mirror, and that's when something moved from the corner of my eye. This time I gasped and turned. Whatever I'd seen had disappeared, but that wasn't at all comforting. At the time, I wasn't sure what it was, but now I'm positive. Now I know what lives in the darkness. It had been a rotting corpse, dressed in a frayed, ashen tuxedo, grinning and waving at me, the skeletal hand marred with chunks of dirt in the joints. A worm slid through its jagged nose. Maggots swarmed around the empty, lifeless eye sockets. Just death, saying hi. I stood there, frozen and miserable, staring at my reflection, wondering what the hell was happening to me. Either the floor warmed up or my feet numbed over. Either way, I didn't seem to notice anymore as I gazed into the mirror. It had been a long time since I'd taken a good, honest appraisal of myself, and I walked to the counter, leaning in close. I've always been fair-skinned, but this particular morning I looked downright pale. Deathly pale, my mother would have said. Dark circles ringed my bloodshot eyes, attesting to the nightmares I'd had since New Year's. I winced. Maybe I hadn't seen a zombie in the damn mirror after all. Maybe I'd just glimpsed myself. Not an encouraging thought. As for the rest of me, I've always been average height, about 5'10", and slight of frame. I was on the swim team at Robert Sloan High, but other than that I've never been too athletic or strong. Always a bit on the bony side. Narrow shoulders, slim waist. At 30 years old, however, I was beginning to grow a bit of a belly. And this morning I looked like death warmed over, to quote my mother again. Then, bored and a little disgusted with gawking at myself, I looked around our large bathroom. Attesting to the fact that a woman lived there, everything looked very clean. Joan had opted for a feminine motif. Peach-colored towels, fuzzy peach toilet cover, peach floor mat, and a peach shower curtain. I hadn't really cared before, but now I suddenly despised it all. Black, I thought. Everything in here should be black. That'd look much better. On the countertop, next to the sink, sat a porcelain plaque that looked like an old piece of wood, with charcoal letters burnt into the grains. It said, "The world will embrace you, only when you have embraced the world." Joan's touch, of course. She has a fondness for such platitudes. I've never paid much attention to it before, but as I read those words for perhaps the 1000th time, they seemed incredibly shallow, incredibly dumb. Glaring at that plaque, I sneezed, And for no reason I could figure, I felt the urge to grab the fucking thing, raise it over my head, and throw it down on the cold tile. I wanted to hear it shatter, watch it bust apart on the floor. I'd never felt such a destructive urge, and I fought it with all my might, mainly because I knew Joan loved that plaque, and I couldn't do anything to hurt her like that. It took several deep breaths, but the sudden rage passed. I distracted myself by thinking about Joan as I turned and walked toward the tub. Joan Weiland. We'd met at a party thrown by my boss, Bill. Joan was there with a friend of a friend, and we hit it off over glasses of red wine. At the time, she was a writer for the entertainment section of the Stark City Chronicle. We exchanged numbers at the end of the night, and the rest was history. That was 3 years ago, and we've been living together for the last 2. Good thing, too. I honestly don't know what I'd do without her. She certainly came to my rescue this morning. I was still trying to clear the cobwebs and the image of that smiling corpse from my mind as I pulled the curtain back and stepped into the tub. Usually I turned the shower on before I got in, but I wasn't thinking clearly, and time was running out. Couldn't be late for work, you know. But death hadn't had its fun yet. It was still toying with me, and let me tell you, it's got a sick sense of humor. When I turned the shower knob, eager to feel the soothing heat of hot water on my shriveled skin, I got hit with the next practical joke. Blood. Streaming from the nozzle, splattering onto my skin, the peach curtain, the white walls, the porcelain tub, crimson streaks as it rained down upon me, thick, warm, and sticky. Lurching back, I screamed, gaping at the blood dripping from my hands, and before I had time to even process what was happening, I looked down. Big mistake. Because there, circling the drain in a dark tide of gore, was a severed human eyeball. No shit. Staring up at me as it swirled around and around, the white, bloodshot as my own, stained with blood, the iris, blue like mine, shimmering with a strange glow, the pupil slit and somehow hateful. Mere words can't describe that amount of surreal terror. All I can say is that I think my heart stopped beating as I shut my eyes, pressed my hands over my face, and backed into the ice-cold wall. I'm fairly sure I was crying, and looking back, I'm both surprised and grateful that I didn't leap from the shower in a mad panic. If I had, I probably would have tripped and broken my neck. But then Joan saved me by rushing into the bathroom and ripping the curtain back. "Blaine," she shouted, "what's wrong?" "Joan, get out," I started to scream. But when I dropped my hands and opened my eyes, well, let's just say it remains one of the most embarrassing moments of my life. No blood, no crimson streaks, and, thank fucking Christ, no severed eyeball. Just the water, growing warmer, filling the room with steam. I shivered. The image of blood spraying from the nozzle was still pulsing in my mind, and I was petrified. "What's wrong?" Joan insisted. "What happened?" I jerked, and that's when my heart started beating again. I know because it was beating so hard that I thought it was going to explode. I looked at Joan on the verge of a hysterical meltdown and saw several emotions shining in her eyes. Worry, fear, confusion, annoyance, but most of all, concern. I'd scared the shit out of her, and looking at her, I saw myself through her eyes. A grown man, pale and skinny, cowering in the shower for absolutely no reason. In other words, pathetic. A voice inside my head told me to lie and tell her that I screamed because the water was cold. But what I said was, "Joni, I think I just had another nightmare. Only this time, I was awake." Staring straight into my eyes, Joan took a deep breath. "Are you all right now?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the shower spray. Ashamed, I looked down, trying not to think about the eyeball swirling in blood. No way in hell was I going to tell her about that. "Yeah," I said, "I think so." "Good." A moment passed. Not completely silent due to the shower. "Something very strange is going on here, isn't it?" Joni said. Feeling as if I might lapse back into tears, I forced myself to look at Joan. "Yes," I said, and though I was sure that something odd was going on, I had no idea what it could possibly be, and I was scared. Joan took another breath. The pain of her cramps was evident on her haggard face. "I think, maybe, I should spend this weekend at my parents' house," she said. "You know, just until you're over being sick." I shuddered. The last thing in the world I wanted was for Joan to leave me in that apartment all by myself for a weekend. If I'd been smart, I would have gone with her. But I wasn't, and I didn't. Sure, I said. Good idea. Joan shrugged. Unless, of course, you rather I stay. It's just that with you being sick and my hellacious cramps and all. No, babe, I said, interrupting. It's a good idea. It makes sense. All right, then. I guess I'll just pack a bag. Sure. I was putting on my bravest front for my woman, but I'm sure she saw right through it. I'm sure she saw how terrified I was of what was happening to me. I'll leave in a little while. Wincing from another cramp, she held up her right finger. But if you need anything this weekend, call me, okay? Of course I will, babe. All right, it's a plan. Another moment passed. Very awkward. Now I saw pity in Joan's eyes and something else. Something like fascination. She was looking at me almost as if I were a stranger, and it was creeping me out, big time. Look, I gotta finish the shower, I said, trying to lighten the mood. How about I join you for coffee and toast in about 10 minutes? Sure, hon. Sounds good. But she stared at me for another few seconds before she pulled the shower curtain back and walked away. I growled, frustrated at every damn thing in my life, and stepped into the spray. I was half expecting it to turn back into blood, but it never did. The eyeball never popped back out from the drain either. I must be losing my mind, I thought. And now it felt as if I might be losing Joan, too. All because of these stupid fucking nightmares. But unfortunately, the nightmare was just beginning.